This is The Strange Recital, a podcast about fiction which questions the nature of reality.
My name is Brent Robison. I like to write fiction, although the definition of that term can be pretty slippery. I've mixed a lot of so-called true events from my life into my fiction. It's a fun game to play. For instance, I recently began a new first-person story that uses an old metafictional gimmick. The protagonist's name is the same as the author's. My friends in this small town where I live all know me as a writer, and most of them know I didn't grow up in this area of New York State, nor even on the East Coast. They know I moved from the West. But, except for my wife, not a single one of them knows the real story. See, I've created a persona, and I perform it well. I've told everyone that I come from generations of Mormons and lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, before moving to New Jersey in the late 80s. I've told them I left Mormonism, divorced my first wife, and moved east to start a new life. These are lies. The truth is a little more strange. My earliest memory, one that I'll never forget, is of being awakened from sleep, summoned up out of warm subterranean darkness by a hand on my shoulder and a man's voice. I blinked, slit-eyed and wondering at a blazing crescent of light until it became the sun rimming a faceless, silhouetted head. He made unintelligible noises at first, noises that slowly assembled themselves into words that I understood. My fingers felt grit wherever they touched. I was thirsty. I did not know where I was. I knew nothing. The man was a hiker, a weekend wilderness explorer. He had found me asleep, lying naked in the sand at the foot of a cliff in a remote desert canyon in southern Utah, far from any road or town. No clothes, no supplies, no footprints, nothing to even begin to explain me. I was a young man then, perhaps in my early 20s, I was told. My exact age was a mystery, along with my name and my entire past. I learned later that the year was 1974. The hiker and his wife, both school teachers in Salt Lake City, became my first longtime friends, almost like parents to me, although only a decade older. I withhold their names now to maintain their privacy. They gave me a home, away from the institutions that became my residences the first few years. They taught me, not merely about practical functioning and necessary facts, but about kindness. I will be forever grateful to them. I never regained any memory of what had happened to me before waking up that day. I spent many hours with many doctors. My body was scanned by machines and tested in labs. Brain, of course, but also thyroid, liver, kidneys, testicles, colon, motor function, reflexes, pupil dilation, again and again. Sleep studies, dream analysis. I was interviewed by reporters and interrogated by police. I was poked and prodded, coaxed and coddled, drugged and disbelieved, and finally forgotten. Occasionally during those early years, my teacher friends took me to their Mormon meetings and encouraged me to meet young women there. I enjoyed a few conversations, but I found the environment stifling. I vastly preferred the Saturdays when they took me to the mountains or the desert. I never grew tired of seeing the Wasatch Front in every kind of weather. Ridges of brown and deep green sloping up and up to snow-streaked granite peaks that towered over the city, jutting into dramatic skies of pure azure or billowing white. Then, when we drove up the long canyons and hiked rugged trails into the humming silence and the infinitely rich living detail of those rough crags and grassy meadows and sweet piney glens and vast views, I found myself speechless with ecstasy. The same thing happened when we went south to the desert, where eons of wind and rain had sculpted stone into shapes like liquid frozen mid-leap skyward everything painted rust and bronze, standing up like the ribs of the earth against a vast blue dome, and where the golden light of sunset could turn the most harsh and dangerous wilderness into a glowing, fantastic dreamscape. These are the places where I felt born. But then, with dread, I would return to the sterile cubicles where the quest for my identity went on and on. With all that research, still no one ever explained the initial anomalies. I had a full command of American English, but appeared to know very little about current American culture. I didn't know who the president was, but could talk about art and literature and philosophy with more than common familiarity. I loved solitude, but smiled easily and could rise to genuine, enthusiastic conversation, even in groups. I exhibited no symptoms of mental illness. Yet I was often treated as mentally ill. In one California hospital where I spent a month, there was a patient who never stopped talking. He called himself Frank and claimed he had a unique condition. Anamnesis, man. I mean, these doctors never heard of that shit 'cause they don't know Plato. But I do, he ranted. Anamnesis. It's the idea that we have knowledge from past lives, and learning is just rediscovering that knowledge inside our minds. That's me, man. I'm rediscovering being an Aztec priest who cut out the hearts of holy virgins. I stayed away from Frank. Soon I was sent back to my handlers in Utah as the probes continued. I must confess, I was not a willing research subject. I was a fast learner and quickly began to pretend I knew more than I did. I was a successful adapter and a skilled liar, and I lied to anyone I didn't trust. What did it matter to me whether they learned something they hoped to learn? I just wanted to live my life. Who am I? Yes, of course that question was of deep, burning interest to me, but I knew it was my question alone, not theirs. It was a lifelong journey I was on to create a self. My two benefactors understood. They helped me invent an imaginary identity, something ordinary and believable. And once the medical legal system had given up and spit me out, I became that man. A mask to wear while the internal investigation continued. One Christmas, they gave me a 35mm camera with 2 lenses and a tripod. I quickly discovered that I could sometimes come close to capturing the perfect way the light streamed across the land. Not always, but I was happy to keep trying. My new identity now included photographer, aspiring. Before the turn of the decade, I was able to get a job in downtown Salt Lake City, stocking shelves, handling inventory, and eventually serving customers. That was where it seems my life in the civilized world began, in the crowded, 2-floor jumble of Sam Weller books on Main Street. I loved it. I was a regular working man, a bit of an outdoorsy loner, sure, but with a few casual friends. I found it easy now to tell my practiced lies about my past when necessary, but mostly I avoided the subject. And boxes of color slides had begun to fill my small apartment, product of the hours spent happily tromping the wilderness. By 1984, with 10 years behind me, I was feeling whole. One day I was stocking shelves, and a book that had been in our inventory for some months caught my eye for the first time. It did more than catch my eye. It riveted my attention, and I didn't know why. The cover showed a bold woodcut of a mountain in amber and burgundy. I stood for an endless 10 minutes of forbidden idleness, entranced as I leafed through the pages and gathered the gist of the contents. It was the true-life account, mostly through letters and a handful of woodcuts, of a young artist-poet from Los Angeles, an obsessed romantic adventurer who disappeared in 1934 at the age of 20, disappeared alone in the southern Utah desert, without a single trace ever being found. The book was by W.L. Rusho and was titled Everett Ruis, A Vagabond for Beauty. I bought the book that day, and I still have it on my shelf, one of the few that later made the trek with me from west to east. I read it in a weekend, then I read it again. His passionate, articulate descriptions of Western landscapes and solo adventures were compelling to me. In a deep way, I understood Everett Ruiz. But there was something else. I was also interested to learn that although he was born in Oakland, he had spent part of his childhood in Brooklyn and in Palisades Park, New Jersey. This struck me because for the previous month I had been haunted by recurring dreams that woke me in the darkness, woke me not with emotion or story, but with stunning pictures vibrating in my mind's eye. As far as I knew, these were images of something I had never seen with my physical eyes. Glittering, jagged, chaotic yet orderly, monumental and, amazingly, man-made. The skyline of New York City. I began saving money and making plans. In 1987, I said goodbye to my Utah friends and rode a series of Amtrak trains for 3 long days across the great emptiness of America to Penn Station, NYC. Poverty in a Fleabag hotel was eventually relieved by a job at the original Barnes & Noble store and a studio sublet. Dawn, golden hour, midnight, I was out on the street with my camera, and the hidden portfolio grew. I confess that beauty came to me in entirely new forms in New York City. Not just dazzling cityscapes and fine architecture. Women. I had never seen such women. Everywhere. Sidewalks, parks, museums, diners. For 5 years I was fully engaged with experiencing, consuming, reveling in female beauty. A better-than-college education that gradually taught me about relationship with a capital R. I was a late bloomer learning that beauty and kindness, beauty and love, beauty and happiness don't automatically go together. Some months of celibate lonerhood followed. It was the summer of 1993 that I was roaming Central Park and passed a woman sitting on a bench reading a book. She looked up as I walked by and gave me a lovely, surprising smile. A half hour later, I couldn't help myself, that smile was an irresistible magnet. I went back and sat next to her. "What you readin'?" "Amelia Earhart, a biography." She showed me the cover. It uses a lot of her notes and journals from before she disappeared. Her own words, her passions. It's good. And then she smiled again. That's how I met Wendy. Her secret story will remain her own. Before 2 years were gone, we had fled the city for the silence, clean air, and green forests of Woodstock. Beauty all around, and more made by our hands. She flew inner space and intuited the conjuring of sculptures shaped like perfect masks. I captured autumn blaze, diamond-spiked snow, dripping woods, until gradually my pursuit of beauty turned from image to word. A vagabond for language, a seeker of story. And parenthood took us arm in arm into its ineffable realm of double-edged delight. Years accrue, each more like the last. Now, on the top shelf of our big bookcase, between stone bookends, are those 2 volumes that brought us together. Ruiz and Earhart. True tales of long-past mysteries, utter vanishings without which, it seems, we might not exist. I have become a senior citizen of this alien planet without ever knowing my origin. This is my memoir. Now you know the truth.
That was Vagabond for Beauty, a memoir, written and read by Brent Robison. Brent? Were you raised by wolves? Or coyotes? Perhaps you founded a city but have forgotten where it is now.
Well, any of those things could be true, but since I've forgotten it, maybe it's not real at all. How do we know?
Well, the usual question I might ask about how much this story is autobiographical seems irrelevant, so I'll spare you that.
Yeah, well, it's in the title. It's a memoir, and that means it isn't fiction, right?
Yeah. I have a vague recollection of myself as a young boy, maybe 4 or 5, of my father as a younger man, of a yellow plastic suitcase and a stormy sea. I also recall myself as a younger man and my son as a little boy, maybe 4 or 5. There was a ladder. I find that memories are fleeting, like images I can't really see or stories I've never read. Did you have similar sensibilities with this story?
Well, wow, I really like that phrase, like a story I've never read. That sort of describes life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Memory is really a fascinating topic for me. Its unreliability and the way that the first version of the memories combine later with dreams and then combine with photographs, and the memories get edited, and pretty soon it becomes complicated inner world that's 100% subjective and may not be very attached to the original truth at all.
Yeah, there was one.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've known you for a while, and some of the things you've told me about yourself match up with some of the details in your story. And then you say these things are lies. That intrigues me, as it makes me think of the liar paradox. That's the well-known logical paradox where someone states that he or she is lying. If they are actually lying, it means that they are being truthful, which means they are lying. A situation where truth and falsehood contradict themselves. So, who exactly are you?
Well, that word exactly makes that a rather impossible question to answer. There's lots of choices to be made. If I can think of something that I am, well, I am not that because I am the thing that thought it up. But anyway, I wanted to say that I'm really glad you brought up the liar paradox, because it's part of my new novel that I'm halfway through at the moment. There's a point in there where there's a book within a book, and the author of the book within the book says, everything in this book is a lie. And of course, as the liar paradox states, if that's true, if it is a lie, then actually it isn't true, and so there must be truth to be found in there. But anyway, I actually like the concept that logicians have come up with, since they don't like contradictions. They came up with the concept called dialetheism, which says that a not true and true can exist at the same time about a statement. And that's the kind of thing I like, the idea of opposites being held in the hand at the same time and just accepting that.
Yeah. It sort of seems that it's going towards quantum mechanics there.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you woke from sleep. If indeed it was you and not another man with the same name. You woke from sleep naked and with no memory of a previous existence, but with a clear memory of the landscape of the West, which you describe so beautifully. What does that suggest to you?
Well, I think the main thing I hear in that question is the idea of beauty, and whether it's the beauty of what we typically think of as nature, or whether it's also the beauty of man or woman as part of nature. There's something about beauty as a current, like an electricity that runs through everything physical, and it transcends individual identity.
At the end of your story, you say that this is your memoir, and at the beginning you stated that you like to write fiction that you embellish with incidents from your own life. You might say that you are presenting the truth as a falsehood and the falsehood as a truth, very fitting with the contradictory reflections of the liar paradox, in a delightful, thought-provoking and geometric contortion. There's a downside, though, to seeing truth as relative. We see it all around us these days.
Yeah, well, when you say we see it all around us, I think of the real world we live in and business and media and politics. And I want to be careful about category confusion, because that's a type of truth that we face in our everyday life that certainly we have to do our best, looking at probabilities and evidence, to do our best to figure out what truth is on that level. But then there's another level that is deeper. It's sort of like Everyday World is the TV show in which there are facts and truths, and the bigger truth is that it's all just electrons displaying on a screen. I think keeping the definition of truth separate in different categories helps me in any case. And the word is something I try not to use lightly. I left it as the very last word of the story after all, and kind of an inside joke with that last sentence being, now you know the truth, as if a story like I just wrote could give anybody any truth.
Yeah. But we're going to have to end it here.
Okay.
That'll be $145 for today. I can give you a bill if you want to submit it to your insurance company. Shall we say the same day and time 2 weeks from now? Let me see. That would be August 29th.
Okay. Yes. Well, thank you. I hope I remember to show up.
These 7-minute sessions are very productive, don't you think? This is The Strange Recital, on the web at thestrangerecital.com. The music on this episode is an excerpt from Brown Eyes, composed and performed by David Temple from his album Arrival. This is episode 18081.